Hi everyone. So we were reading A Bear Named Trouble last Thursday. We didn't get through the whole first chapter, but we read all of Bear's perspective. And so we found out that he was living with his mom for most of his life. And then his mom kind of growled at him and made him go away, so he had to live alone the rest of his life. And so I'm going to start reading. I want you guys to follow along in your book. So on page 5, I will be starting to read under the star. So it should start by saying Jonathan stood. So I'm going to give you a moment to make sure that everyone is getting that out right now. All right, page 5, where Jonathan stood, right under the star. I want everyone to put their finger on Jonathan, and I'll begin. Jonathan stood well off the zoo path, deep among the trees, so as to be away from other visitors. Here he could be alone with a pure white goose that was his favorite creature in all the zoo. "Come, Mama Goose," he called, reaching into his pocket for the corn he always carried when he came to the zoo. "Come, look what I have for you." She tipped her head to one side, studying him, then suddenly flapped her great white wings and honked loudly. Jonathan jumped just a little, and some kernels flew from his hand. As tame as she was, Mama Goose could still startle him when she did that. When she was very young, she had been a pet. Once she'd grown past the cute, fluffy stage, her owner had decided he didn't want her after all and had donated her to the zoo. Mama Goose had a good life here. All the kids loved her. But no one, not anyone in the world, loved the pure white goose as much as Jonathan did. "Come, Mama," he called again, and settling onto a patch of ground that wasn't too snowy, he held out a handful of corn. Mama Goose took a cautious step forward toward him. She always did that, too, acted as if she had forgotten him, as if she didn't remember he was the one who came to see her every single day. She bobbed her head up and down, took another step. Jonathan held his breath. And then there she was, not just pecking the kernels of corn out of his hand, but clambering with her wide, flat feet right over his legs and settling into his lap. She always gave her tail a final shake when she settled down, murmuring deep in her throat, kind of a low chuckle. "Hello," Jonathan whispered, running one hand down her silken neck. He took another handful of corn from his jacket pocket and held it out. Mama Goose gobbled the kernels eagerly, then tilted her head to peer with one bright eye into his face. "Who are you?" she seemed to be saying, and not incidentally, "Do you have any more corn?" Jonathan laughed. "I'm Jonathan," he said. "I've told you that before. And yes, here's more corn." She watched intently as his hand disappeared into his pocket and emerged again. Then she bent her elegant neck to receive the new offering. "Just wait until Rhonda sees you," Jonathan said, watching her eat. "She loves birds, and she's going to love you more than all the gulls over Lake Superior. More than the bald eagles, too." Rhonda was his little sister, but she wasn't here in Alaska with him and their father yet. When Dad moved to Anchorage to take his new job as a keeper at the Alaska Zoo, Rhonda and their mother had stayed behind in Minnesota so Mom could finish out her teaching job in Duluth. Jonathan had wanted Rhonda to come with him and Dad, but Mom had objected. "Rhonda needs me," she'd say, as though Jonathan, being all of 10 years old, didn't. In June, once school let out and their house was sold, Jonathan and Dad would fly back to Duluth and bring Mom and Rhonda and their yellow lab, Marigold, and Rhonda's betta fish, Boy Blue, to their new home in Anchorage. And then, at last, they would be a family again. But it was only April. June was a long way away. Jonathan stroked the goose's elegant long neck again, feeling the living warmth beneath the feathers. "You'll like Rhonda, too," he told her. She honked her agreement with that. "I've told Rhonda I'm going to adopt you for her," he added, "so when she gets here, you'll really be hers. I'll have enough money to do it by then." He already had $17.50 toward the zoo's adoption fee of $30. You could do that at the zoo, adopt one of the animals, and then it was as if the animal belonged to you. Though whatever it was you'd adopted remained at the zoo, of course. Imagine adopting a Siberian tiger and taking it home. Slowly, carefully, Jonathan encircled the white goose with his arms and buried his face in the feathery softness of her breast. She tolerated his embrace briefly, then bent down to peck his ear. "Ow," he said, releasing her and grabbing the offended ear. "That wasn't very nice." But nice or not, Mama Goose rose on her stubby legs, shook her feathers back into alignment, then climbed off his lap. As she waddled away, her tail feathers twitched with each step. Jonathan smiled at the picture her rear end made. Mama Goose always made him smile, and scrambled to his feet. Though he had managed to avoid sitting in a patch of snow, his own rear was cold and more than a little damp. He wasn't done with the white goose, though, even if she was done with him. There was the game to be played still. He closed his eyes and stood perfectly still for a long moment, breathing in the alive smell of the wet earth. When he opened them again, he was ready. It was a game he'd played with his sister since she was little. He'd pretend his way inside a bird or an animal, then he'd tell Rhonda exactly what being that animal was like. He and Rhonda were still playing the game, even if they had to do it on the telephone now. That meant he had to store up details for the next phone call. He couldn't make the game real without the right details. Jonathan squinted his eyes, studying Mama Goose, who was busy pecking at something hidden in the damp leaves. Feathers. First there would be the feathers, soft and stiff at the same time. Feathers all over their bodies. And beaks, of course. He brought his hand up in front of his mouth, defining in the air the size and shape of a beak. "I know," Rhonda would say, impatient for him to get on the good part, the part where the flying began. "All birds have feathers and beaks." "But," Jonathan would remind her for the 100th time, "you have to be inside the feathers, inside the beak. You have to feel them." "And inside the wings," she would say, and without even seeing her, he would know that her cheeks were plumped out with a teasing grin. But Jonathan refused to be hurried. He never let himself be hurried when they were playing the game, no matter how impatient Rhonda got. Waiting a little didn't hurt her. Rhonda hated waiting, but then she was rather spoiled. Everyone in the family admitted that Rhonda was spoiled, even Dad, who was the next one who spoiled her the worst. Next, Jonathan would remind her about Mama Goose's eyes, how she has one eye on each side of her head. "That's so she can see in every direction at once," he'd explain, "so she won't get caught by predators." But of course, Mama Goose didn't have to worry about predators. Life in the zoo was safe. "Our feet," Jonathan spoke out loud now, as though Rhonda were by his side and could hear, "are big and flat. You'd think a goose's feet would be cold, standing bare like that on the snow. But they aren't. It's got something to do with the veins being closed together. I don't remember exactly what." Finally, he got to the part he knew Rhonda was waiting for. He reached his arms out wide and said, "And our wings are strong. When we stretch them out, they catch the air. I can feel the way the air lifts me off the ground. I can feel the flying in my wings. Can you feel it too?" And without even closing his eyes to concentrate, he heard Rhonda's answer. She looked up at him with those sky-blue eyes that always captured every fragment of the light and said, "Yes, Johnny, yes, I can feel it, just like you. We can fly."